As a Unitarian Universalist, you can believe whatever you want. No holds barred, anything goes. I'm sure you've heard that one before. Hey, you might have even been the one to say it to people. This week, we're of course turning our attention to the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, which states, we affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Now, I love this principle. As it currently sits in the official 7 principles, it's right in the middle, so I often refer to it as the anchor principle. But when you add in the 8th principle we've adopted here in Lexington, well, it's about halfway, so I guess that still works. But anyway, I love this principle because I believe it speaks to the real, concrete work of our religious tradition. Unitarian Universalism is part of what is called, historically, liberal religion. Now, in 2020, people hear the word liberal and automatically assume politics. And, yeah, it's true. UUs are overwhelmingly progressive in their politics. But what liberal religion means, quite simply, is that we are free tradition. We do not ascribe to a creed or established dogma, and there is no test of faith. The official declaration of Unitarianism as a distinct entity in the United States came to us in 1819 when a man named William Ellery Channing preached for 3 or 4 hours at the ordination of a friend in Baltimore. It's a great sermon, and it makes clear that for the Unitarians of the day, first, they claimed the Unitarian label. It was often a slur that was thrown at them, but they claimed it. And second, they claimed a free Christian faith. Free of creed, free of dogma. But what I love most about that sermon is the text Channing preached on, and he kept it very simple. The entirety of the sermon reflected on 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 12. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. Easily my favorite verse from the entirety of Christian scripture. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. And we see that verse reflected in our UU principles and sources, and especially so in the 4th principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Often when we look at this 4th principle, we immediately think of getting our belief-o-matic results online, and that's great. I usually find out, well, guess what? I'm a Unitarian Universalist and a humanist, and I have been all along. Big surprise. But depending on my mood and how I'm doing that day, sometimes I get Quaker or Hindu or Buddhist or non-theist. But if I find I'm in a really bad mood and I might need a little more hellfire and brimstone, maybe some mainline Protestantism gets toward the top of the list. But one thing remains, though. No matter how many times I take that belief-o-matic test, I find out I would make a terrible Jehovah's Witness. So, sorry, guys. There should be some levity to our spiritual quest. There should also be intentionality as well. Balance the levity with what's serious and what needs to be serious. The freedom we have in this work, in this spiritual quest, is not the part that's in question. We all know this, but the one word that we often forget is the second part of this principle. It's a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. A responsible search. What does that mean? Well, it means that our quest for truth and meaning should first not cause harm for ourselves, for others, and for the world around us. I would argue that any belief system that encourages retribution or hellfire and damnation is not responsible, and it's potentially abusive. And I know that's my opinion, but I wholeheartedly believe that. It also means that we are accountable for our search for truth and meaning. Are we taking advantage of others or a community such as ours on this journey? That's not responsible. Do we approach a religious community with the consumer mindset, always asking what we can get out of it without actively supporting and nurturing the community? I'd say that's not responsible either. And we could go on and on and on, and we'd probably make some startling discoveries about what a free and responsible search means when it comes to religious and spiritual matters. We might even find that we haven't been responsible in our own lives. I know I always haven't been. But don't beat yourself up for that. Forgive yourself. And remember that our principles are not a test of faith. They're a statement of values and aspirations. But when we look at our current situation, the time of pandemic, how does a free and responsible search come into play here? Now, you could spend all day defining truth and meaning, go for it. I'd even love a conversation about how truth and fact are words with blurred lines. Should they sometimes mean the same thing? When shouldn't they? Great questions, and I'm sure philosophers are going to go for it. But when we look at our free and responsible search for truth and meaning during a pandemic, I get stuck on the word responsible again. But not in the ways where I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir. Yes, the protesters against stay-at-home orders are irresponsible. People refusing to wear masks, that's irresponsible too. Rushing back into things, that's irresponsible. You all know this. Instead, what I'm thinking of right now is you and your self-care. Is filling our minds with nothing but COVID-19 news all day a responsible action? I don't know. How are you feeling after doing that? Do you think dwelling in anger at our government is a good use of your time? Well, you tell me. Is ignoring the weight of sustained worldwide trauma going to work out for you? I really wonder. I ask myself these things often and many other questions. But where responsibility comes in here is acknowledging that we are the stewards of our mental health and well-being. And yes, there are issues to access and resources. Don't get me wrong about that. And yet there are simple things we can do. We can begin first with framing our self-care as a part of the fourth principle, that free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Do we have a free and responsible search in defining what self-care means for us? And what do you need to be healthy, safe, and cared for? What does freedom and self-care look like when it's tempered by responsibility? And how is the way you are moving throughout the world right now impacting those we love? When we ask those questions, it has everything to do with truth and meaning. And we could keep on going with the questions. But I want you to ask yourself the questions that you need to be responsible for your self-care, whatever that means for you. And so I look forward to you asking those questions, and I look forward to joining you next week as we reflect on the fifth principle. Blessed be. Amen.